I'm not going to sit and have a go at Sinn Féin, or I'm not going to have a go at people who use the language for political purposes or whatever, because everybody's entitled to use the language in any way they want, the same as English. But what I'm saying is I have a right, and other people have a right, to be part of that language, to speak that language, to learn that language, and to claim that language as their own. I've always regarded myself, I'm Irish, I'm Irish within a British context. I was part of a cross-community women's group, and when this opportunity came up to do Irish for 6 weeks, I remember just feeling interested. We obviously must have made it obvious that we were two Protestants on the day. And I remember...
How would you make that up?
Well, we didn't have our Union Jack t-shirts on or anything, I don't know, but...
You just looked like one.
We must have looked like one, maybe it was our eyes or something, I don't know. The hidden history of Protestants in the Irish language. I think you're ringing the wrong side of the town, love, or nobody here would be interested in that sort of thing. But I became aware of the hostility towards it too. Some people changed their attitude towards me, that I became the enemy. I see the language as a medium of reconciliation. I see it in my classes, I see it in my work every day. People coming together, sitting down. Some of the things I've read about myself on social media, like I'm a traitor, I'm a Lundy, I'm working for Sinn Féin, I'm even being paid by Sinn Féin. Somebody even said I was going out with somebody in Sinn Féin. Every word spoken in Gaelic is another brick in the bridge that unites us as a group of islands, because that's what we are. Never mind the politics, geographically, we are one island, Ireland, and we're only 13 miles away from that other island, and we are a group of islands.
Welcome to the Dig podcast. I'm your host, Caroline O'Neill, and we're here for another week with another amazing guest. But before we get started, I just want to give you that wee reminder that I give you each week. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, because it means that we can keep getting amazing guests each week and lots of stories and actionable advice that can help us in our lives. And also on Apple and Spotify, hit that follow button, helps the podcast grow, and we can keep doing this and bringing all the amazing people to you each week. And today we have an unbelievable, inspirational guest with us. She's sitting right beside me. But before we turn to her to speak, I just want to do a wee introduction just so you can capture the essence of who she is before we start to talk. Linda Ervine. So Linda has broken down barriers and created space for conversation in the most unlikeliest of places. And that's what we're going to talk about as well. She is a community leader from East Belfast and one of Northern Ireland's best known advocates for the Irish language. Linda grew up in a loyalist area, and her husband was a leader of the PUP for a short time. But her journey into language activism is very, very inspiring, and it's been shocking as well for many. I'm going to talk about both sides of that and how Linda has navigated that so bravely and courageously. Through her work with Turas in East Belfast, she has brought hundreds of people from Protestant and Unionist communities into Irish language classes, opening minds and healing divisions, and all the things that we've been through here. She is definitely causing that positive effect across so many communities and sparking conversation in parts of society where Irish language was often seen as an off-limit topic. And you know what? It's great to be able to explore that with her and find out how she's moved through that, and also about her life and how she found herself doing this as well. And she's right beside me. Linda, thank you for coming to the Dig podcast.
Thank you for the invitation, Caroline.
And I was just telling you, I first saw you on the Tommy Tiernan show. I lived with my mummy and daddy for a while whenever we were building our house, and they loved Tommy Tiernan, and now I love him as well. But you were one of the guests.
I was.
And I didn't know you, but my husband did. And he was like, God, Linda be a great guest for the Dig podcast, and here you are. What was that like being on the Tommy Tiernan show?
That was a lovely experience, and I wasn't really au fait with Tommy's work before that, but I've watched him quite a bit since that. And no, it was a lovely day actually.
And I think it was great because he didn't know you were coming. He really was curious from the start about who is this woman, what do you do, and really got that. He could sense that from you, and that's whenever I started to really get interested in the work that you do. But before we get into all your work now with the Irish language and everything, I'm sure you're doing lots of other things I don't even know about, I can just imagine. But this is always about people and their lives as well. Tell us a wee bit about your life, I suppose, from the early days and how that shaped you maybe to be the woman you are today.
Well, I suppose my early life really wouldn't have been very promising as to the career I ended up having. I was born in a street called Thistle Street, or well, we were living in that street when I was born. Obviously, I'm the third generation of my family that was born there. My nanny was born in Thistle Street, my daddy was born in Thistle Street, and that's where we were living when I was born at the end of 1961. We eventually went up to Beaver Estate, and I grew up mainly in Beaver Estate, sort of southeast Belfast. My parents' marriage broke down when I was 7, and for a while we had to go and live with my mother's people over in North Belfast. And I suppose for me that was very traumatic. And then we went back to Beaver, and eventually, and I went back down to the Newtonards Road in East Belfast. My childhood was a bit troubled, and that caused me problems, particularly in school. I had been bright, I'd passed the 11 plus, but when I went to the local grammar school, I just couldn't function, couldn't cope. So I ended up moving around a number of schools and ended up being expelled from a number of schools. By the time I was 15, I had been expelled from the last school that I was at, a school called Park Parade in East Belfast. That was probably the one I went to the longest. At that time, it was a sink school, really, you know. I was then found myself pregnant just around about the time I turned 16, and my baby's father didn't want to know, and I suppose I found that rejection very difficult, but what could I do? So Kelly was born, and that changed me because it made me settled. A few years later, it was maybe a year or so later, I met the man who became my first husband, and say we lived, he was from the Newtonards Road as well, we lived on the Newtonards Road. Bad housing, just difficult times, a lot of poverty. It was 1980, Maggie Thatcher had come in, and, you know, her attitude was sink or swim. Well, we certainly sank. You know, he lost his job. He was a factory worker, and there was no money. We were on benefits. It was hard. We had another 2 children. Again, bad housing. Just a lot of difficulties. A lot of difficulties. My first husband ended up having problems with alcohol and drugs, and became quite violent. And by the time my children were teenagers, the marriage was really on the rocks. I had suffered from, I was sort of quite young, I'd suffered with a lot of mental health issues, agoraphobia, fear of eating, all sort of anxiety and panic attacks. I took a breakdown when I was 27 and just found it very hard to function. The things that changed me and changed my life, I suppose there were 3 things that happened for me in my 30s. I went into education, first of all, and I started off, my aspiration was maybe to work in an office. Now, at that time, I didn't even know anybody who worked in an office. I didn't know what they did in an office, but this seemed like a dream compared, you know, to any of the jobs I had ever done while I was able to do them were, you know, working in chippies or cleaning, you know, things like that. So I went and I did word processing and typing, and I actually applied for a job in an office and they wouldn't take me because I had no experience, which was a good thing, because I then went on to do GCSEs. At that time, my first grandchild was born. She was born when I was 33.
Oh my goodness, you were granny too.
Yeah, I was. So my daughter got a job, and she had put the baby's name down for the creche in the local college. So because she got the job and I had the baby, I went to the college, and I, as I say, I did GCSEs, I did a diploma and then an advanced diploma in ICT. I then went on, they talked to me about doing an access course, but when I found out that an access course took you into university, I said no, because I wasn't going to university. So I did 3 A levels instead, and then did apply for university. And by the time Jordan Lee, my granddaughter, was going to P1, I was going to Queen's, and I came to Queen's University and I did a degree in English. And for me, I was still full of fear and agoraphobia and just anxiety and panic. So everything about it was frightening and overwhelming. But I came and I did it. Along with that, the other two things that I think saved me at that time was I got the opportunity to have psychotherapy. And I found that a very difficult process, a very painful process, but a very helpful process. And I'd had other mental health, I'd CBT and talked to psychiatrists and psychologists, and I never found that helpful at all. And I didn't have a lot of faith in psychotherapy, but it was really, really healing. And I was
What
also
is psychotherapy?
Psychotherapy is really talking and exploring, and it's very intense therapy where you go and you meet a therapist and you talk about your past, your present, and I find it very hard to explain. It's sort of the magic doesn't happen in the room, but somewhere it just raises your awareness. It breaks down some of the things that you feed yourself, and it makes you come to terms with where you are and I suppose the part that you play in it yourself. So, I had to take responsibility for my own actions as well as, the fact that, there were things that were outside my control, particularly as a child. But, as an adult, I had made choices and quite bad choices at times. So it helped you to come to terms with that. And then I was saved. I ended up in a local church. I had never had, my family were atheists, and so I'd never had a faith. I'd never been interested in faith. But Jordan Lee, my granddaughter, a neighbour was taking her to the local Presbyterian church, and I am a Presbyterian. I was christened in a Presbyterian church, but I had no knowledge of faith. And my daughter asked me when I go over that Christmas to the Nativity, because Jordan Lee was involved in it. And Jordan Lee was very wee, and she was maybe about 3 or 4 at the time. And for me, you went in, you didn't make eye contact, because you didn't want to hear any of that nonsense, you just got in and got out. But something, I don't know, someone spoke to me. And at the time I was studying A-level English literature, and one of the poems that we were studying was a poem by one of the metaphysical poets, and it was a poem called Peace, and it was about the inner peace that you get through God. And I remember at the very end of it, it was, "Leave then thy foolish ranges, for none can thee secure, but one who never changes, thy God, thy life, thy cure." And though I didn't have a faith, I held on to that. I printed that out and I put that in my handbag and took that with me.
Are you going through the menopause, or do you know someone that's going through the menopause? Well, then I'd like to tell you about Menaligna. Menaligna is a fantastic product that has been created by Linwood's Health Foods, who are our sponsor on the Dig podcast. Why is it so special? Well, it is a sprouted flaxseed and chia seed blend. But this is the fascinating part, is that it has an added 3 grams of flax hull lignans. And I was reading up, lignans mimic estrogen. And that is so important for anyone that's going through the menopause. So with just small changes every day, using Menaligna, adding it to your cereal, your smoothie, your yogurt, then you can start to address energy, cholesterol levels, skin, hormonal balance, and so much more. And if you're in the menopause, or you know someone that's going through the menopause, then you'll know all that language and you'll have heard those things. So this product helps with that, and it's available in selected Tesco stores. It's also available in Holland and Barrett and health food stores. You can also get it online at linwoodshealthfoods.com, and you can get 20% off, which is brilliant. You can enter DIG20 and get this delivered straight to your door and start to try it and start to feel the benefits of those small changes each day.
So I started to take Jordan Lee to church every Sunday, which I think my ex-husband thought was a bit strange, but I wasn't causing any harm.
Exactly. Is that just from that one time you went?
Yeah.
Right.
And she went into Sunday school and I sat at the front, and it was a very traditional, old-fashioned church, and I just cried. And I mean, when I say cried, I mean snatters. I mean uncontrollable crying. And I remember one of the hymns, it was, Jesus, I can trust thee with my soul, guilty, lost and helpless, thou can't make me whole, you know. And something drew me to it. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it was, and I was frightened of it in many ways, because it wasn't a road I wanted to go down. It wasn't how I saw myself. I also, my father, who died recently, I knew that he would be very disappointed, because he was, you know, an atheist and very left wing. So none of this really appealed to me, but it was irresistible. I couldn't, and it was life changing as well, you know. So I wrote, not a poet, but I wrote a little poem about my experience with being saved. And I called it I Met a Man. So I met a man, he changed my life. I need to tell you what he's like. He said he loved me, but I had no faith, for I had heard such things before. But this man's different from the rest. This man saved me from myself. Now the world is full of men who hurt, and I learned early that people are pain. Don't trust. Protect yourself. But this man is like no one else. I've met a man. He's changed my life. I've met a man named Jesus Christ.
Oh my God. You're like me. I getting emotional too now listening to that. So much emotion in that, isn't there? Like, because it's all about your life as well, and how it's unbelievable. And I've never heard anybody. Well, I've never heard anybody speak about how that happened to them, or how they felt like, oh, this.
Well, those things just, you know, it was like for years, you know, I think about childhood, I think about my teenage years, I think about my 20s. It was like anything that could go wrong did go wrong. And then all of a sudden it started to change. And I started to build a life. I started to become well. I turned out I was good at education. I got my degree. I did a year's teacher training. I walked into a job in a local secondary school. Actually, it was a secondary school that wouldn't take me when I was a teenager. And I taught there for 9 years. My marriage had broken up while I was at Queen's. And when I was doing my teacher training, I met the man who became my second husband, Brian Ervine.
Yes.
Though I didn't realise at the time that that's how that was going to pan out, you know.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Have you wrote a book? You don't have a book, do you? Like, you've written.
I think I'm going to eventually.
I was thinking, there's the start of it. Well, obviously there'll be much more that you know, but like, that is unbelievable story. And I again didn't know all of that. And you can't tell the later part of your life, I don't think, and because that shaped you now,
Yeah.
who you are.
It did.
And when then did you, like, when was that nativity? Like, was that when you went that time?
Yeah, that probably was, oh my goodness, 2000 and probably 2001 or something like that. 2001.
But you still reflect on all them times, obviously. Like, do you ever look back and think, oh my God, I never thought I'd see where I am today, compared to, say, that 15-year-old girl that was through so much?
Very much. I had a very strange event that happened. It was very emotional. I was asked to go and speak somewhere, and it was about women and violence, and I didn't feel it was really appropriate for me, but they said, no, we want to hear about your work. So I went and I talked about my work, and I ended up in this small group with other women. And one of the women that was there, I can't say that she looked familiar to me, but when she talked about her life and talked about the work that she had done, and one of the jobs she had done was she had, I think she was a civilian, but she'd worked for the police in domestic violence. And as soon as she said it, I looked at her and I recognised her, because she'd been at my home a number of times and she knew who I was. and I just broke down. And it was almost like the past hitting you in the face. It was very, very difficult, you know.
It's part of your life, and I suppose you can't deny what's happened, but like the fact you're being asked to speak at an event like that where other women or other people are and addressing those issues, you're helping other people now with your,
Yeah.
I suppose, experience. But it's all, people have to go through so much to actually get to that point to be a person to help someone else, I know, but maybe that's a positive part on it that you can now.
Well, I think, and in fact, my son was talking to me about this recently. You know, I am in a very fortunate position that that's not where I am anymore. And my two daughters, one of my daughters is a social worker and another one is a manager of a sort of a program that works with families in crisis. And particularly my older daughter has said sometimes she's went into homes and said, Mummy, it makes me think of who you were, but that's not who you are now, you know. And I recognise a lot of people who are in those situations due to mental ill health, poverty, lack of education, you know, just difficult marriages, just whatever, difficult home lives. They don't get out of that situation. They don't get the chance to get out of that situation. And for whatever reason, I did escape that. You know, I never thought I would at the time, but I did.
And is your the mental health side of things that obviously affected you so much right up, is that something you still have to work on, Linda? Like, you know, the way you went to psychotherapy and or is your faith now your kind of your therapy? What way, like, do you still have to look at that? And
I think there's a bit of both. I think the faith really helps me because when you know, if I'm under pressure and I can feel those cracks appearing, it's faith that I would turn to. But at the same time, you know, there's still, I suppose, what I would call a residue. I'm not a traveller. I don't like travelling. I'm a home bird because I feel safer at home. But at the same time, you know, I'm not trapped at home the way I was when I was ill. So I'd say I'm not what I would call 100%, but then I don't think anybody really is.
no, definitely not. But it's just interesting to see the way you can find ways to cope with, I suppose, maybe a stressful situation, and yours is faith. And I'm just thinking of people who are listening who are going through those hard times, like you talked about. Like, what would you say to people who are maybe in that throes of anxiousness and all the things you were going through? Was there anything that gave you relief before you found your faith? I'm just thinking was...
Yeah, well, my nanny, you know, she had a wee saying that I think is very true. This too shall pass. And I think when you're young and you haven't life experience and something happens, you don't realise that, you know, this will come and go and you will get through it. You feel that, you know, you're stuck there, but things do pass and sometimes it's very hard, especially the difficult times, but life does move on. You know?
And it has for you, because you are definitely making movements and making impact in your community across all communities, and that's what I wanted to move on to talk to you about today. So what about, like, I suppose coming from here, where our country, Northern Ireland, in or the north of Ireland, whatever anyone wants to call it, it's still our place, and it's with so much trouble over the years. What, like, did you have any, like, outlook on that when you were growing up about politics? Were you ever involved in or seen any troubles where you lived? Like, how did that shape you? Are you thinking about returning to work? It can feel so overwhelming, full of the unknown. And that's where Timely Careers comes in. Northern Ireland's first flexible jobs board. It supports over 2,000 women with one-to-one coaching, skills training and employability support. CVs, LinkedIn profiles, interview skills, and it's all free. So whether part-time, term time or compressed hours, Timely Careers helps you return to work, but on your terms. With jobs across every sector and all seniority levels, Timely Careers connects women with careers that work for them and their employer. So to find out more, visit timelycareers.com today.
Well, again, it was a mixture of things. You know, I had been born in the North Road, but we'd moved up to Beaver. Beaver was relatively quiet estate. It was a loyalist estate, but relatively quiet. But because of the just family situation and difficulties, we spent a lot of time with my grandparents on the Newtonard Road, and they lived on the interface, or became the interface, Thistle Street. And we'd been there, most weekends and holiday times, which is when the trouble was there. So I suppose this would have been sort of 69, 70. I would have been about 7, 8 years old, and there'd have been rioting. And one of my very strong memories, which I think was maybe the beginning of my anxieties too, it was a 2 up, 2 down house, kitchen house, and me and my brother would have slept in the back room. And I remember my granda putting chicken wire up in the back because they were worried about petrol bombs coming in through the window. There was a school behind the house, and sometimes they say there'd have been rioting in the area. And I remember one night in particular, things got really bad, and my nanny, my granda, who, had lived through 2 world wars, who took things very much in their stride, bringing us downstairs and turning the lights off and lighting candles and the police radio playing in the corner. But as a child, in that wee house, I just remember the noise, the shooting, people running up and down the street, the echo, it was just so noisy, people banging off the doors. And for me, the fear, that somebody would come into the house and, being really terrified. And another night, somebody threw, it was only a nail bomb into a house behind us. And I remember me and my brother going the next day and kind of investigating, and it hadn't done a lot of damage. But that night when it went off, it was like the world exploding. So after that, I used to hyperventilate. And my nanny, again, people didn't know then, she used to get a Valium and crush it up in a wee bit of milk and give it to me, to help me to sort of be calm. But I've very strong memories of that, and very strong memories of, again, it was a playground, I suppose, for us. There was Catholic people at the top of the street, and they had been, people were put out and people fled. There was a mixture of both happening, sort of Bryson Street, Thistle Street and whatnot. So the houses were empty, and suddenly we could go in to people's houses. And, a thing that fascinated me was that you could see their wallpaper, And I remember another time after very bad rioting, Bryson Street, my nanny walked me down the next day, and people's furniture ran out in the street, and the windows smashed, and curtains, and even children's toys, And I remember it was a really wet morning, and she had been down, they were looting the shops, and she had went down and got games for us. And so, that these kind of mixture of memories, just of that time, sort of.
Like I don't have any memories at all of anything like that. Where I come from country, kind of didn't have any like housing near us or anything, and I don't have any memories like that. So I can't even imagine. And I'm thinking about my own children having to see that. I would be so. You want to protect them, like for you to see that as a wee child. And so many people here in this country will resonate with what you've said as well. But so whenever you moved through your life and on through, and then you said you went to Queen's and did English, how did you find yourself? Because you said you did English. So then tell me about how it's all grew, where you're now very much immersed in the world of the Irish language.
Well, I got the opportunity then to, I suppose, just do a wee taster course. Now, I didn't even do a language at school. I didn't learn French or anything, so I'd never any interest in learning a language. Didn't really appeal to me. But I've always regarded myself, I'm Irish, I'm Irish within a British context, and I've always been attracted to, Irishness, I suppose, which I hadn't even really thought about a lot, but I am, or I was. So when I saw this, I was part of a cross-community women's group who met in East Belfast mission. And when this opportunity came up to do Irish for 6 weeks, I remember just feeling interested. I wasn't very good at it, but I liked it. And the woman who was taking it, Maureen Herndall, who's a Protestant Irish speaker from East Belfast, she told me there was going to be a Jane Cursor, like a one-day intensive course in a place called Andrehead over in the Armour Road. So I'd never heard of Andrehead, but it's an Irish language centre. And I spoke to my friend, and her and I went on the day, and people made us very welcome. But at that time, I probably perceived it as a Catholic language, as a niceness language, as something south of the border, something that wasn't really pertaining to me, but I was interested in it. We obviously must have made it obvious that we were two Protestants on the day. And I remember...
How would you make that obvious?
Well, we didn't have our Union Jack t-shirts on or anything. I don't know, but...
You just looked like one.
We must have looked like one. Maybe it was our eyes or something. I don't know. But so during the lunchtime, the girl Onyamara, who was taking the class, who was lovely, told us that there was actually people came from all places, and there was somebody else from East Belfast came, and I remember saying, and you'll never believe this, he is a member of the Progressive Unionist Party. I said, oh, Onyamara, my husband is the leader of the Progressive Unionist Party. And that really was the situation. I started then going to classes. And
before you go on now, just whenever you're saying that, how did you have that conversation with your husband that you were going to this, and how did he react?
He had no problem. Bran actually had a few words of Irish before I ever did.
Right.
And again, has always regarded himself as being Irish and within a British context. And so no, he found it quite interesting and was very encouraging. He now has been studying Irish with us. We used to call him Bunrang Brian because we never got him out of the Bunrang for years. But he did his Fonyarigage, I think that was the year before last. So he's now climbing the dizzy heights of lower intermediate.
Right. Okay. So tell me then, take me back again, because I just did on you there. So you then said, well, that my husband's in this position. So that I'm sure that sent shockwaves through the room.
Which I probably didn't realise, how significant that was at the time.
What date when would this have been?
This would have been 2011.
Okay.
So I started going to classes, and as well as going to classes in Andrehead, because I didn't know you could go places to learn Irish, I went over to Arsvik in North Belfast. I went up to Inadavach in West Belfast, and people were lovely. And it used to be interesting when people say, oh, where are you from? They say East Belfast. The Short Strand. No, Newton Arch Road. Oh, you're joking me. Oh, that's lovely. So people were...
But were they in their head thinking, oh, I wonder what that means? Does that mean that she, like, is that they're probably all sorts going through their head?
I'm not sure. But, on a sort of face value, people were friendly, they were welcoming. I had found this thing that was just really enjoyable, really fun. And because Bran was the leader of the Progressive Unionist Party at the time, it was quite a stressful time in our lives. It was very stressful for him. And this was a lovely wee escape. And, I used to sit with my couple of focal, my few words in the house, and it was just something nice to learn, and I used to practice with him, or while I've cup and tea, and teach him to say but why or near why. He never said near why, to be honest. So that was nice. And one of my granddaughters, Sasha, she was very young at the time, and I had this folklore, this dictionary, with all pictures, and she used to say to me, Granny, get your green book. And me and her used to sit and say all the words, So it was just a fun thing to do, and I didn't see it as anything more than that. But I think what became interesting for me was, as well as starting to learn the language, I started to learn about the language, because I didn't know that I'd been born in Belfast. I didn't know that these place names were all around me and that they meant something, because nobody had ever allowed me to know. And suddenly, I was compared to the first time when I got pregnant. I suddenly saw all these prams, and I saw all these pregnant mums. And of course, they'd always been there, but they weren't on my wavelengths. And that was like the Irish language. It had been there, but it wasn't on my wavelength. So suddenly I was aware of the language all around me. And in words that we use in our everyday speech, in our place names, just in all sorts of ways. And it fascinated me. And I'd also found something that I thought was so lovely, and I wanted to share that with other people. But I became aware of the hostility towards it too. That people some people changed their attitude towards me, that I became the enemy.
And would that have been in the wider circle? Sorry, take your time there if you want to have a drink. I'm just wondering, like, are you, obviously when you would put that out to bigger communities, you're always going to get that impact of people having different opinions, and that's fair enough. But are you talking about more close knit? Are you talking about a wider reach of that message, or?
It really was in both ways, because first of all, social media, I didn't even do social media then, but somebody showed me on Facebook or something where I was being attacked for, you know, learning Irish. And, you know, I thought this is very strange, you know, like I'm not sewing up tricolours and plotting the downfall of the state, you know, only learning a few words of a language. So that was weird. But that wasn't as difficult as a small, very small number of people, but significant people, who I would have regarded as friends, who just really, you know, fell out. I mean, they didn't speak to me about it. They just distanced themselves, you know. So I found that hard. I found it difficult that
you weren't expecting that. You weren't expecting that reaction, which shows the genuineness of what you were doing.
And also, you know, overall, there was a lot of positivity. There was a lot of people who came and said, oh, here, I want to do this too.
Right.
You know, so most people were positive, and there was a small number of people who were negative. But the ones who were negative made it difficult, you know.
Because as it grew from just being that lovely hobby of going to your class and a few words in the dictionary, and it grew into so much more. Did that happen? How quickly did that happen? Or
that was a gradual, and again, it's very hard to explain. So sometimes I do believe things are meant for you. I just have this, and maybe it's my faith. And I remember talking to my husband and saying, I just feel I have to do something with the language. And he said, what? And I said, I don't know, but I knew there was something. And there was a number of, probably people would call them coincidences, but I didn't think they were, that kind of led me down a particular road where I was introduced to Forrest McGillica, the CEO and the deputy CEO. And I had a meeting with them, and I talked about the fact that I felt very strongly that something needed to be done within the Protestant community. But I didn't at that time really know what it was. And I went away and I sort of worked that out a bit more, and I met with them, and I got the opportunity to apply for funding through East Belfast Mission. And I'd never filled in a funding application in my life. It took me a couple of months. And
ChatGPT now, that would only take you an hour.
I could do it in no time. They had to actually get it translated into English as well, because they didn't have one.
Okay.
Theirs was in Irish, and I didn't have very much Irish at that time. And I put in the application through East Belfast Mission, and then waited, and I got word. I remember that Easter getting word to say that the application had been successful. It was a small amount of money. I think it was 40,000 pounds, but that was going to allow me to take a year's career break from my job. I was an English teacher in a local girls' secondary school. And it would pay then for some of the running costs and a management fee to East Belfast Mission. So it wasn't a big lot of money. I had to take a sort of a pay cut in my salary. But it was something I wanted to do, and I wanted to give it a go. I couldn't have done it if I couldn't have got a career break, because, you know, I was in a permanent job,
yes,
a well-paid permanent job, and I didn't know how this would go. But what was really strange was the night before I got the job, so I started the job, we'd had this one class going that I was doing voluntary, and because I had got the job as the development officer in East Belfast Mission, we were going to start another class for total beginners. So I was in a local church, not the mission, and I asked, could I announce this new class if anybody was interested? And I remember looking out on this sea of very hard faces, and I said, you know, if anybody wants to speak to me afterwards, nobody.
Like, I'm even retracting back because I'm
Yeah.
afraid for you of
Yeah,
what,
I know.
because
I
it's,
think I was quite naive,
and
probably,
well,
too, you
I'm
know.
listening because on either side of community, right? If I went in to a chapel, or if you went into the church and you said that, like, was that naivety, or was that bravery, or was that a bit of both?
Well, my husband always says, you know, Linda's not courageous, she just doesn't think of the consequences. And he was probably right. And I think it was just my own passion for it. I just wanted to share it with other people. And
So what was the actual reaction? Was it just silence, or
silence, yeah. Just,
and any aftermath?
well, I think there was some people who probably were hostile, but not overly. You
Okay,
know,
good.
I found other hostility in other places.
Yeah.
But I remember then the next morning, and I started the job on the 3rd of September 2012, officially. And because I do have a faith, I decided I would look at the daily reading for that morning. And, you know, Brian had sort of said to me, because we lived behind the mission, and he said to me, Linda, you know, you need to keep your mouth shut, lover. We're not going to have any windows, you know. So that was, you know, not an encouraging start. So I had
A realist.
yeah. I had a look at the daily reading for that day, and it said why we work. And at the bottom, and I use this now when I do talks, it said at the bottom, be not always wanting some other work to do, but gratefully perform the task the Lord has given you. And that no matter who pays your paycheck, you're really working for God. And I personally believe
That's what it said. That's what
yeah,
the thing
that was a daily reading.
But
for
where's
day.
that daily reading from?
It was a the Daily Bread, you know, it's on a wee like a wee online Christian
Right, okay.
daily reading.
Okay.
And I still have it, and
I need to get that too.
yeah, no, it's
That's
good,
lovely.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And so I personally believe that that's why Turas, which is what we called ourselves, which means journey.
How do you say it properly? Because I don't
Turas.
think I said it. Turas.
Turas.
Okay. Means journey.
Means journey, yeah. Journey or pilgrimage.
Right, okay.
And I believe that's why we've been successful in what many people would see as stony ground. And, you know, one of the things that always strikes me is, especially because, you know, I come from that interface area, and when I first got married and whatnot, that's where I lived, in the interface area. We were the last Protestant house on what is a, you know, 1/3 of Beachfield Street is Protestant, and the other 2/3 is Catholic. Now there's a sort of a wall between it, but when I was first married, the house that we lived in, it was just open, and we'd got our windows smashed regularly and had to have grids up and things, you know. Couldn't have put Kelly out at the pram or anything, or that have thrown stones at her, you know. But, you know, the Bible that I didn't read until I was in my 30s, nowhere did it say, be very suspicious of Emmons over there. You know, wasn't in it. But
No warnings.
But sometimes I'm not so sure during the Troubles if all churches got that message, you know. But I'm glad we're in a better place now, you know.
Thank God, thank God. But what, like, so you got the job. I'm so intrigued to know how this has all moved through and how you've dealt with all the challenges. That was in 2000 and remind me again when you got that, you started that job.
And 12 I started the job.
So you never went back to teaching?
Never went back to teaching, no.
Okay. So kind of like an entrepreneurial spirit there too, and leaving the
I-
job, and it's like you're starting like your own.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was working within East Belfast mission, so I created this whole new project. And I have to be honest, there was a lot of passion in me, but also a lot of fear that, you know, did I really know what I was doing? I had to make a success of this. I wanted it to work, so I just put my heart and my soul into it. And, you know, I thought, well, I have a year, and let's see what we can do. So one of the first things I did, because my background then was teaching, I lived by PowerPoint. I loved a good PowerPoint. So I had been reading all these books about Protestants in the Irish language, ones like Presbyterians in the Irish language, Rory O'Blaney and Snoddy's Head in Ulster, and other things produced by the Old Talk Trust. And I was discovering, you know, all these things that were new to me, like Belfast, and, you know, And I just put it all into a big PowerPoint, and I could see the links between my own community, the links to the Presbyterian Church. Like in the 1830s, the Presbyterian General Assembly called the Irish language our sweet and memorable mother tongue. I was a Presbyterian, but I'd never known that. That in Scotland, the Presbyterians and there's Gaelic speakers in Scotland. I didn't know that. And they sing the Psalms. Their first language is Gaelic. I ended up going to visit them. So the Church of Ireland Church has in common Gaelic na Haglisha, have their own sort of Irish language section. So all these things that I seen as being very Protestant had these Irish language links. And I was just kind of, I used to sit in the city and read these books and, find these things online. And I'd send to my Brian, did you know, did anybody ever tell you? So
had anybody ever told him?
No. So it was a total wake-up call for us. So I wanted to share this. So what I did was, because my background was teaching, so I was good at delivering information. I knew how to do that. So I used imagery, I used music, I used, bursts of information, simplified it. And, I could deliver a talk. And one of the things, because I have a teaching background, there are people who are really, really knowledgeable, but they don't know how to get that across to other people. Yeah. They don't know how to bring it down for other people. They don't know how to engage other people. Where I'd been taught to do that, I taught secondary school girls, I had no choice. I had to survive. So one of the first things I did was I created this PowerPoint. I called it The Hidden History of Protestants in the Irish Language, which I felt was an engaging title. And I started ringing round groups, schools, churches, organisations, anywhere I could think of to say, look, nobody knew who I was then, but, I'll come and do this. And they said, oh, right, okay, yes, we have a men's group, women's group or whatever. Yeah, we do like to get speakers in. What do you charge? And I've said, no, this is my job. It's totally free. Oh, right, okay. Yes, okay, we might be interested in that. And what is your presentation about here, And I said, well, it's called The Hidden History of Protestants in the Irish Language. And there'd be a silence. Think you're ringing the wrong side of the town, love. Or nobody here would be interested in that sort of thing.
Okay. So how do you answer that?
So, well, I couldn't. Okay. I actually couldn't. And I found that very hard. So I got no. I also got some sympathetic, yeah, but we would be scared, like we've had problems before and we tried to do this and we got trouble and, and good luck with it, but not with us, And
when you think about that there, Linda, sorry to just jump in, it's understandable as well, that fear, isn't it? Like, I mean, I can understand that because just hard times and so much trouble and heartache across everywhere. And you can understand the fear. You really were moving forward before anyone else. Yeah. So tell us then.
There were two opportunities arose that really turned things around. It was the PUP's, their annual general, whatever, I don't know, conference. Okay. Sort of their annual conference.
Yes.
And I approached them and said, look, could I do this presentation at the conference? And they said, yeah, certainly.
Was this when your hubby was?
No, Brian was gone then. Right. And so I went and I did the presentation and I wasn't sure how it would go. And it turned out to be very popular and there was a lot, good conversations afterwards. I was asked up to a loyalist estate then to do it with a group of residents, and that went very well. I also got some other opportunities then to go to the places within the loyalist community that came out of that. I was also invited up to the Shankill Women's Centre, and I remember there was a load of people there that day. The place was just bunged, and I had got these little cards just done, and I think, oh my goodness, I had a few hundred of them. Every one of them went, people. And after that, I never rang anybody again, and I just got phone calls. And, people, message went round that I was a good speaker, that it was interesting, that it was enjoyable, and I got invites to all sorts of places, you'd never believe.
Well, I want to hear, but can I ask about the other side of it? Because you're educating people in the Protestant community, and what about the Catholic community that need this education as well? Does that go both? Because it's very...
And that came later. People then from the Catholic community started to ask me to come out, and I got all sorts of invitations. So, I've been everywhere, all sorts of communities, all sorts of places, all sorts of people. I remember I was asked actually to speak in the Felons Club. I've spoken in the Felons Club one time. And
How did that go?
no, that went well. And that the wee PowerPoint I did then, that I used to do at the end of it, it had Chucky Arla and Ní Elamid. So Ní Elamid means no surrender. Okay. So I said to them, I'm just very historical moment. I don't think anybody's ever said no surrender in the Felons Club before. It's probably a first, And so that got a bit of crack. So yeah, it's just, and I just learned that if somebody invited me, I went, because that was my job, and I go and speak to whoever. I also find it interesting, our own people who came to classes, because at the beginning, the people who came were, I suppose, very local, very sort of inner East Belfast, mostly majority Protestant. Over the years, that has changed and developed. We're now very cross-community. I think probably the majority are still from within the Protestant community. We would get people sort of East Belfast, North Down, Castlereagh, those sorts of areas. But we get people from everywhere and from all backgrounds. But I remember when certain Catholic people started coming in at first, we would have got Catholic people who came from East Belfast, in the early days, because this, I suppose, was a natural fit for them. But when Catholic people started coming maybe from other parts of the town, particularly young ones, a number of them said, and I found this interesting because it had never, I'd thought my work was about changing attitudes within the Protestant community. So this hadn't struck me. But what they said was, I rejected it at school, or I didn't want to get involved with it, even though I was interested in it, because, it seemed to me very political, and that's not who I was. But now the Jews are doing it, and I thought, that had never struck me before, so in a way I felt, we're not only freeing it up for Protestant people to get involved, we're kind of freeing it up, and that has been my message. And I'm not overly interested in saying, I'm interested in depoliticising the Irish language, because I'm not comfortable with that kind of attitude, because lots of things, housing's political, of course, lots of things are political.
Yeah.
I just don't like the language being party political.
Yeah.
And I think at one time probably it was. Yeah. But I think, a lot of people have moved on from there. So for me, what I'm interested in is the language being shared. I see the language as a medium of reconciliation. I see it in my classes. I see it in my work every day. People coming together, sitting down, genuine friendships and relationships being made because they love the language. And I always say we've even had 2 marriages and 3 babies, Yeah. I do a little bit of matchmaking as well.
Good for you. I could see you would have that in you, yes, bringing people together, and then there's romance happens even better. And what about whenever you're doing all of this and you're talking about all the marriages and the lovely things and people coming together, there's bound to be the stories, Linda, of I know there's been things where people have walked out in different groups, hasn't there? And negative. Do you want to talk a wee bit about that? Because it's not even really about what they did. I want to know how you handle that, because there's people listening and they may be facing opposition in their work of different things they're doing, or in their homes with the communities. I want to know, how do you handle that? Because that's hard. So what happened? Tell us if you have a story even, or...
It is hard.
Because you don't set out to create that animosity or that feeling, so it's hard when it happens. So
yeah, and again, I suppose maybe I was naive when I went into the job, that I didn't recognise that there would be that sort of a reaction. So I remember at first being really shocked, and I remember saying to my husband Brian, I'd be showing him something that somebody had written about me, or, and his attitude was, toughen up, there you go, it goes with the territory kind of a thing. And I remember him saying to me, like, don't be taking it personally. And I said, well, Brian, it's me they're writing about, But in many ways he was right, you kind of do have to just learn to do that, and learn that, some people do not like what you do and have an idea. I mean, some of the things I've read about myself on social media, that like I'm a traitor, I'm a Lundy, I'm working for Sinn Féin, I'm even being paid by Sinn Féin. Somebody even said I was going out with somebody in Sinn Féin. And when I said to Brian was shocked. He said, where do you get the time? But
never mind the Sinn Féin, but where do you get the time to do it?
Yeah. So, and it's also interesting too, because you see people, and I think there's a lot of misogyny sometimes. Naomi Long gets attacked because of her weight. Carla Lockhart gets attacked because of her appearance. I've seen Michelle O'Neill being attacked because I think she's like me, she was a young mum, and the thing that I get attacked for, which I found interesting, was money. She's only in it for the money.
Right. And I'm sure that's certainly not the case.
Well, the thing is, I left the better paid job I work for, so I'm always very open. I said, well, I work for a Methodist church. They do not pay well, I have to say. And, but I love what I do. But it's the fact that, it's your job. Yeah, well, it is my job. That's right. And I'm entitled to get paid for doing my job. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I love it. And, I do above and beyond probably what I'm meant to do. And, there's no such thing as a 9 to 5, and anybody who works with me, they're very aware of that.
Was there any particular scary time where you thought, right, maybe this is time?
There have been scary times when I had a very difficult time last year around the school, where it became very personal. The attacks became very personal. I was branded a liar. Things that I had said were taken out of context, were misused. I felt that I couldn't, particularly because it was around the school, that I couldn't defend myself. There was other things going on in my life at the time as well that were difficult. My son was very ill, and I'd just been working too much. I was also finishing university, and I didn't have the resilience that I normally do. And some people who I believed I could trust turned out to be untrustworthy, and that was very difficult, and they have their own reasons for their behaviour. But it was the first time, I'd have to say, it made me unwell, that I just wanted to back off. And Brian was very angry about it, but when I think if he'd have been 30 years younger, you'd have liked to be it all around him. But he knew that wasn't the answer. And I remember in the house, him just sitting holding my hand when I cried, because there was nothing else I could do. That was when a time, particularly faith, was very important to me, because the only time I felt that I could get, I suppose, peace of mind was in church or praying. And, I came through it. And I remember a particular, verse from the Bible, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And I had to hold on to that and believe that the things that were being said were untrue. But some of those things are still being used against me, and there's nothing I can do about that. I mean, I had a run-in, let's call it, with a couple of weeks ago, who were shouting. This was basically in the street, and some of the things they were saying were ridiculous. Like, this was about our school. I mean, some of it is laughable almost. So one of the things that was said was, you know, why didn't we open a school in the Short Strand? Well, because our children aren't from the Short Strand. Our children are from East Belfast. And, you know, there's an interest from parents both in the Catholic community and the Protestant community who want the school. They want their children to be educated in an integrated school through Irish. And one of the things that was said was, like, we couldn't go down the Short Strand and open an English-speaking school. I think there's one down there already, and it's called St Matthew's, you know. So sometimes that's what you're dealing with. Also, stuff around the school, you know, it was made out that we were the cause of schools closing down in East Belfast. Well, you know, a lot of schools have closed down in East Belfast over the last 25 years. Schools that my children went to, schools that I went to, the school that my husband taught in. And they closed down because of the drop in the birth rate and because parents chose with their feet to send their children to other schools because, you know, sometimes when a school starts to go downhill, then parents abandon it. That had nothing to do with us.
No.
And I'm also very aware that because I was a teacher, that there is a, you know, sort of a history of low educational achievement in parts, you know, especially in loyalist areas. There's been report after report written about this, but no actual solutions found. And I don't believe that what we're doing is a one-size-fits-all solution. But I can see from what I've read and from schools I've visited, not just here, but in Scotland and in the Isle of Man, the benefits of bilingualism. And we have brought that to East Belfast. We have brought that to parents in East Belfast who want the avail of it. We haven't forced anything on anybody. We're an independent school. We raise our own funds. And, you know, we've seen our numbers increase and we've seen the positivity. Our children now in P1, this is the first time we've offered P1, are actually, you know, outperforming where they're meant to be. And, you know, if they will be successful, we will be successful. So that's not a threat to anybody. It's bringing something new. It's bringing an opportunity to an area that has suffered problems. And yet there was a public meeting about, you know, not allowing us to open. There was all sorts of threats. There was all sorts of things said. Now, thankfully, none of that came to anything. There were intimidatory banners put up on our site, which we took down. To stop what? You know, what harm do we do? We're bringing an opportunity, an educational opportunity for those who want it. And I think what we're also doing is we're saying the Irish language does not belong to one community, does not belong to one political outlook. And for me, the more diversity that exists within the Irish language community, then that idea that it's a, you know, it's a language of republicanism, that it's a Catholic language, that, you know, it's Sinn Féin's language or whatever, you know, is put out there, or the other one that gets through at me all the time, every word spoken in Irish is another, you know, bullet and whatever, that will fall like a house of cards because of the diversity, which already exists, but will just become more and more. And one of the things that I have said, particularly around that mantra about the language is, well, my mantra is about the language as one of the Gaelic languages, because there's a Gaelic language spoken here, obviously, in Scotland and in the Isle of Man, and it's part of the family of languages, Celtic languages spoken throughout the British throughout the British Isles. So for my mantra is that every word spoken in Gaelic is another brick in the bridge that unites us as a group of islands, because that's what we are. And, you know, never mind the politics, geographically, we are one island, Ireland, and we're only 13 miles away from that other island, and we are a group of islands. And somehow or other, we need to live within that, because, you know, none of us are going anywhere. Ireland's not going to split in half, you know, mainland Britain is not going to move. So somehow or other we're going to have to adapt.
you're a very calming person. Does anybody ever say that to be around? Like, I'm in trance, I'm just sitting listening to you here. I can't imagine how someone like you reacts to someone hurling abuse or shouting at you on the street. I'm interested to know, how do you react to confrontation like that when someone's doing that to you? Because I want to learn about how to deal with challenging situations. How do you do it?
There's not much I can do, and I'm not always calm.
Are you not? God, you seem very calm. But
I've learned, I mean, particularly, let's say, around social media, I learned very early not to respond to the way that, somebody was, and my husband would have been sort of, don't say that, don't do that, And I've learned to be polite, to be factual. I don't always get it right, I have to say. And I can be nasty and cheeky too. But it doesn't help my cause. And I suppose for me, the important thing for me, and that has helped me throughout my work, is this is something that is much bigger than me, that's much more important than me. I have a role in it. I won't always have a role in it. Other people will come and take the baton. But while I have, I think the important thing is that, if I'm really cheeky to somebody and I score points and, then they hate me all the more, that there's no way they're gonna engage with me or engage with the language. So I have to try and not collude with people, and I think this is an important thing too, not to collude with them to sort of say, we're the nice speakers, it's them and over there you need to be worried about. That's the road to no town. And that doesn't make me popular either, because I'm not going to sit and have a go at Sinn Féin, or I'm not going to have a go at people who use the language for political purposes or whatever, because everybody's entitled to use the language in any way they want, the same as English. But what I'm saying is, I have a right, and other people have a right, to be part of that language, to speak that language, to learn that language, and to claim that language as their own. But it doesn't mean that that's their political outlook or that's their religious outlook. It has no connection. It's like saying because somebody speaks English that they're Protestant and British, or no. Are they conservative, or, or they vote for the DUP? Of course it doesn't mean that. So why would it mean that with Irish?
So you're not going to tear others down to build yourself up, as a message there too.
I'm not
some people do.
interested in that. No, I don't think that is useful to me,
Talk to me about, and I know you're so busy and you're moving on after this to another meeting. I can't even believe you time to come here today because you're so busy, so I really do appreciate it. But what's been the change then? Because I read in the news last week, and I couldn't believe you were coming on the podcast, and I was like, oh, Linda's going to be on my podcast. I read it was an article where there's been a big shift now and a growth in who's coming to join the movement and learn and all, and it was the headline was Orange Men and
I think you shouldn't listen to all headlines.
Is that not true?
No, it isn't. It is true, but it's just taken out of context.
Okay.
So
you see, and again, that's an important conversation, because sometimes media can use the clickbait too.
Yeah, they do.
They do, obviously. Yeah. So tell me then, dispel that, or tell me what's happening.
Yeah. So basically I had a conversation with the journalist, and our numbers have been growing massively. I mean, last year was our biggest. We signed up over 700 people for classes. This year we're on track to do the same. I think at the minute our classes start next week, and it's always this last minute rush, people coming in, and the first week or so. So at the minute there's, I think the last time I looked, it was 615 people so far have signed up for classes, and they're still coming.
Before you move on, can you sign up for them classes online as well?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
So it's Belfast Turas is the website.
Okay, we're going to link that in the show notes.
Great.
Okay.
And you can sign away, and
are you ready for the the influx?
All levels and abilities.
Okay, good.
And so I had a journalist who rang me and asked me how the registration was going, and I was saying, no, really well, a lot of people coming in, and he said, and where do they come from? Do they come from outside East Belfast? And I said, no, they come from everywhere. And I said, majority of our learners, because we do take postcodes, we take religion. Obviously, we haven't looked at this year's one yet, but going by last year and previous years. Most people come from sort of East Belfast, Greater East Belfast, Castlereagh, North Down, Lisburn area. I suppose areas where they don't have access to Irish classes, so we're the sort of place to come to. But really they come from all over. And he said, and would they be mostly Catholic? And I said, well, no, they would tend to be the majority Protestant. And I was saying, at the beginning it was, probably 99% Protestant, but that has changed and developed over the years. I think the last time I looked, it was probably 55-60% Protestant, and then maybe 20% Catholic. The others are growing. I find others very interesting because we live in Northern Ireland, we know who others are. I would say you could spot another, And I find it's more Protestant people who call themselves others.
Oh,
I do. And I wonder if that to do with the fact that, we are in a more secular society, but maybe more Catholics do First Holy Communion, baptism, certain things that even though they mightn't be going to Mass every week, that does connect them in with the Catholic Church. And so they still see themselves as traditionally Catholic, where a lot of Protestants now, they just don't engage with church whatsoever. And so they're more inclined to say others.
okay, interesting.
So it's just something I've observed. So our others have definitely grown.
But others is also perhaps people who are of another religion that's not Catholic or Protestant.
Well, this is interesting too. When we started 13 years ago, others were people from other countries and other religions. That's not who others are now. And we don't actually attract a lot of people from, and I think that's maybe because when people come in here, people, who aren't from this country, they're probably more interested in ensuring their English is good and things like that. So others really are people from here. So it's interesting, and they are growing. But the other thing that ended up in the kind of headlines, the guy said to me, well, what sort of people? And I said, like, they come from everywhere. And he asked me, did we ever get anybody from the Orange Order? Well, of course we have had people from the Orange Order. Not massive numbers of them, but we've had them over the years. And he asked me then, had we ever had people from loyalist paramilitaries? Of course we have. Again, not massive numbers, but they're there. And I think what he didn't really understand was, people from the Orange Order are your neighbours. People, of course, from loyalist paramilitaries, are your neighbours. People live among us. They're just people. And there you go. So yeah.
But the headline caught attention.
Oh, yeah.
And it's good for. But I mean, it was great for the awareness piece as well, but also thought-provoking.
And this is it. And we've had a lot of people to security forces, and serve in ex-security forces. There's people who are interested in the language. And, so there's all sorts, all kinds. And they're sitting down together.
Yeah, and that's what's most
learning
important.
the language, creating friendships, creating relationships. And it's lovely and it's very healing.
It is. And it's 2025. I was about to say it's 2026. When you're in work, you're always planning ahead. It's not 2026 yet. It's 2025. And
I know.
It's unbelievable. I don't even know what to say to you. I can't believe you do this work. I can't believe you moved through all those challenges. Even though I know you don't deem yourself as like courageous. I don't know if you do, but you are. As someone watching on, and I'm like, oh my God, bigger people would have stepped back from what you do.
I love the work.
I know.
Love the work.
But some people love their work, but they're too afraid of the consequences and they'd never fulfill their dreams. So, to hear you do it, I just think it's unbelievable. And, who knows? I don't know what way people will react whenever we put this out and all, but it's like you said, a positive thing that unites people. And I'll always be somebody who champions that as well. So I'm amazed and honoured to have you as a guest. And you know what? I didn't even look down at this. So I hope you don't mind that I didn't. We kind of did talk about all of the things either. But I wanted to just mention before you go that there was a lovely wee piece whenever I was reading up all the things about you, about a 85-year-old man from Derry who wrote you a heartfelt letter in old Irish script. And he gave you £100 Tell me a wee bit about that.
That was, we've had lots of gifts over the years,
Yes.
and really, people, just lovely things. But that was the first one. And it was so special. I mean, I actually got the letter framed. The letter is framed and it's on our wall in Turas, because I didn't expect such generosity, such kindness, such good feeling, and particularly at the start, when it was all a wee bit, you didn't know how things would go, and we had no money, and people were kind of starting, and you were getting interest on one hand, but you could see the hostility on the other hand. And this beautiful letter arrived with this cheque, and it was unbelievable. Now I know that the man has passed on since, because his son contacted me, but it was such a confirmation for me that we were doing the right thing. And that is what I have found over the years in Turas, because sometimes people say, well, how do you keep going when there's bad times? For every bad thing that happens, 100 good things. People come out of the woodwork to say, keep going. We think you're doing a good job. We've had beautiful plaques sent to us. We've had, petitions where people have signed to show their support, and, brought to us. And at times I've been really emotional, because it does take it out of you sometimes, when you're being attacked, and you're reading stuff about yourself, and then this kindness, so that was the first act of kindness, but the first of many, many acts of
What
kindness.
a man to do that, to take the time.
Well, this is
Because
it.
sometimes people don't take the time.
That's what really struck me, to take the time, to send the money, to write the letter, to encourage us, because here we were, this little fledgling thing, and it was such an encouragement.
So what's next? What are you working on?
Well, school, to grow the school is so important, and we've, as I say, we've just got our first P1 class, and we're working on stage 2 of extending the building, and just it's exciting, and to keep parents on board. The nursery now has got really big. The Nice School, we have 21 preschoolers. Last year we had 7. We had to turn all our pre-pre's away. We had 60 applications for pre-pre. Last year we had 15 pre-pre's. This year we couldn't even take pre-pre's. And as I say, our numbers of pre's have trebled in a year. We're on our new site, so we're working on getting our new site looking good. I think we're going to have a wee bit of a community thing at Halloween. We're looking forward to that. Our new classes in Turas will be starting next week, so I'm teaching 3 classes, so I always look forward to meeting our new learners, and it'll be so busy, just so many people and such a buzz. We are also interviewing for certain new staff at the minute. We'll be starting some work with schools, doing some local history around Con O'Neill, the last Gaelic lord of East Belfast, and also Irish language, obviously. And also then our tourism programme, our bus tours, taking people out around the area, and our merchandise, our little shop where we sell the goods that we produce. So it's busy.
How many people are part of the team now then?
Well, we only actually have 4 members of staff.
What?
But yeah,
doing all of that.
But we have a lot of volunteers.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
a lot of people who
can get involved,
believe in what we do,
right,
and really help us. And then obviously we have staff up in the school as well.
Because you were talking about tourists and all, but then a school happened as well, because we didn't sort of talk about that transition, like that growth piece. You need to come back again when you're not rushing on, but to talk about all of that. But I suppose just to let people know, so tourists, and then it grew into the need for the want by the community,
demand, and
for the school.
We set up the school,
which is where the real kind of generational impact will move through
much.
as well, because you're starting so young.
Very much.
Unbelievable. So what about some words of encouragement for us in Irish? You came in the door on the phone talking away. me and Loney and Mary were like, oh my God, just really living the life of an Irish speaker. So what about for those who perhaps haven't heard the Irish language before that listen? Perhaps there's all sides of community listen to the Dig podcast, which I'm so grateful for. And people from all over the world actually listen. So to bring a little bit of Irish to those who haven't heard it before, to those who love it, and to those who just need to hear you and feel your passion. Give us some words of encouragement for life.
Well, there's two things that strike me first of all. There's a little couple of words that I just happen to love. They're just lovely for me, and that is the fuchsia flower, and it looks like ladies' earrings.
Okay.
And it's not native to Ireland, but whenever it came here and it was planted, particularly around Donegal and places like that, as a windbreak, it just loved our climate and went sort of mad. But local people, when they saw it, thought it was so beautiful that they named it Jora J, which literally means God's tears.
Okay.
So Jora J. So I love that. But then a little shanachal that I think appeals to me because it sort of epitomizes my work with Turas and where we started, very small, and getting that little gift from that man. And also then the school 4 years ago, and it's being gach tus lag, being gach tus lag.
Being gach tus lag.
Every start is weak.
Okay.
And I think that's right, every start is weak. And I suppose with people illness too, when you start and that change comes, that first footstep into being well, and that's resonating with me as well, because when I started to get well, I was still very enveloped in illness, and it took a long time to believe that I wouldn't become ill again,
Every step, say it again, is, I said in Irish first.
Being gach tus lag. So every start is weak.
Every start is weak.
Literally every start is weak.
Yes.
Being gach tus lag.
Yes, good words for us all to think about, and how there's always a way forward in some way. What about this book that's sitting here? What is this?
Okay, this is my Yela, this is my diary, and I know I should really be keeping everything on my phone and keeping it digitally, but I like the paper and pen, and then I do live in fear if something happened to this and I lost it. So this organises my days, and sometimes it is absolutely bound with stuff. My eldest daughter, said to me, "Mommy, just because there's a space doesn't mean you have to fill it." And she has taught me about the spoons. Well, the spoons was really interesting, because if you you call your day 15 spoons. So coming here this morning, this could be maybe 2 or 3 spoons. But going to do something else might be 5 or 6 spoons. So she said, you don't measure your day by the fact, oh my goodness, I've got a gap of an hour there, I can shove something in there. She said, you measure your day by 15 spoons.
No, I've never heard this in my life.
Very useful.
Okay.
And she said, that's why you get too stressed. She said, if something is a really heavy thing and that's a 10 spooner, then you don't have room for another 10 spooner that day. It doesn't matter if there's space in your diary, do not fill it with another. She said, so you decide, what is it?
How many spoons are equated to each task, and then plan your day.
Yes.
Oh.
And I don't know if I'm doing that.
How many spoons are you in that drawer of the day? I don't even know.
And I'm going to another meeting, and then I'm speaking tonight at a thing, so I'm probably using up my 15 spoons, but there you go. It's good advice. So my diary, as I say, I try to say no, leave spaces for mental well-being instead of filling them all. But it is, I suppose, a very important book. And funny enough, from the day and hour I started the job, I always had a diary, because then, where I had to go and speak, I've never thrown any of them out. And in my cupboard and work are all my diaries from I started the job in 2003.
Oh my.
Mm-hmm. My scribbled notes.
Imagine if I'm sure you're planning this, are you? You're going to bring all those together into a book.
I keep saying, there's 2 people approached me about writing a biography.
Yes.
And both times it fell through. And I was kind of glad, in a sort of a funny way, because I think I have to do it. I don't want to do it.
Oh, you have to do it.
I can write, I just don't enjoy it. But I do feel I have a story to tell. And I'm thinking very seriously about it for retirement.
I can't see you ever retiring.
That's what my husband said.
But that it's very important. Well, your book exists in all the diaries. I suppose it's just pulling those all together in that logical format.
Yeah.
But there's loads of people out there that can help you. Big shout out to anybody that's listening to do that, because that people need that, because this work needs documented in a way that we're going to be able to read it in one go. I can't believe it. I know I watched Tommy Tiernan, but I didn't really feel all of that as much. I felt like I got a really feel for. I came with you in loads of emotions there through. So much. I just want to say you're unbelievable. You've taught me too how to rise above things that maybe people are saying, and how to react and stuff, and have courage, and reignited. I went to the Gaeltacht for years in Loughnmuir, and it's part of, I suppose, our life as where I come from. But again, I'm so mindful now of all the things that you're teaching on the other side of the community, which I didn't know. And I don't know the history of, Protestants with the Irish language too. And I think that's important that we learn that as well. So unbelievable. I feel like, yeah, unbelievable. Thank you for being my guest today. Again, you're going to give us all the links for people who are listening who perhaps want to find out more from all sides of the community, how to join up. Maybe just that little piece of information they might want or need from the website. And just to follow all the work, we're going to link it, Linda, in the show notes as well.
Brilliant.
Thank you for being my guest. Good luck with all your spoons today. Don't add any more in, even if you've got extra time. And I'll maybe see you again on the Dig podcast when you release that book.
Oh, yeah.
You'll come back on. Thank you to you, the listener, for listening to the Dig podcast. What a very different episode today. One that is probably, sometimes you'll be nervous about talking about different things, but Linda totally put the whole thing at ease, and conversation is good, especially positive one like that. And it does no harm for people to hear what's going on out there and understand people's different reasonings for doing work like that. So unreal, and I'm very privileged to be able to do that on the Dig podcast. Thank you for listening, and remember to hit that subscribe button so that you're going to get notified when great episodes like this go live on YouTube and also on Apple and Spotify. Hit that follow button so that you also will be notified whenever we get these great guests. And I'll see you again on the Dig podcast for my next guest.